As a child, all I wanted was to be an actor. I would sit opposite the TV, watching my favorite TV shows from Victorious to Drake and Josh, and all I could think about was how cool it must be to be like them, a teen actor. Till now, I sometimes think about what it must be like to pursue a creative career in the arts. To be an actor or a singer, all 7-year-old me could think about was fame and attention. But little did 7-year-old me know that less than 10 years after, I was going to live that dream. But I'm here today to talk about the nuance of that dream and how, in my experience, it could have been more of a nightmare than a dream. On June 13th of 2019, my life changed irreversibly. It was the day the first Netflix Arabic original show called Jinn was released, and I happened, truly by coincidence, but also some hard work, to be one of the lead actors. The way it happened was actually truly coincidental. I was walking from my class in the spring of my sophomore year of high school when my art teacher, who happened to be a set designer on set, stopped me and said, "Zaid, I've seen you act in a play, right? Do you still like to do that stuff?" "Yes," I replied enthusiastically, as she went on to propose the idea of auditioning to this Netflix show. And mind you, at the time, Netflix was not that big in Jordan. So while I understood what it was, I didn't quite understand the magnitude of what it meant to be auditioning to a show on Netflix. To audition, Netflix went around schools in Jordan to do live cast auditions, but they didn't come to mine. So I had to send a 1-minute video introducing myself. So I got my guitar, played it a little to spice it up, and then talked about my love for acting. Around 2 months after I sent that audition, I got called, actually on my birthday, for my first callback. After convincing my parents, who were worried that acting would take away from my academic career, a statement that actually turned out to be very true, I convinced them by saying that I wanted to know what it's like to audition, to be around cameras and go through that learning experience. So I went to my first audition and then went right after to celebrate my birthday with my friends, still not quite understanding the magnitude of what I was auditioning for. I got my first callback, then my second callback, and third. And so for the next 2 months, I was going to audition twice or thrice a week. Our audition format was very interesting. It was purely improvisational. So what that meant is you would walk into the audition room with a character description given to you, and on the spot, given a prompt, no script, and you had to act. I remember one of my first, or at least one of the ones I remember, was my prompt was, I was a 16-year-old, introverted high schooler who was coping with the loss of his dad, but has also newly discovered his love for music. And the prompt I was given was that I was outside my high school waiting for my abusive stepdad to come pick me up, but he had been an hour late and it wasn't his first time. So on the spot, I had to act, go into that character, and make a scene. The prompt was intentionally left vague so that they can not only assess our acting intuition, but also how well responsive we were to the director's notes as we repeated that scene over and over till they decided whether or not they wanted us to move on. One of the more bizarre acting auditions was actually group auditions. So you would bring 5 people, all of whom were auditioning for the exact same role, given the exact same character description, give us the same prompt, and see how we would react to each other in that same room. For those 2 months, I sat in the same room as over 5,000 people who auditioned, from those with master's degrees in performing arts and acting, to others who flew all the way from Egypt to audition, to peers from my high school, and some people I've never seen before, but seen so often in this process that they soon became acquaintances and even friends. I was terrified, but more than anything, I was adamant. After every audition, I would go back home and cry because I realized how much I loved to act. But more importantly, I realized that I had potential, and I truly believed in myself. So after 2 months of auditions and even getting attached to the character, I was ghosted. I had come back from vacation, no call, no text. I completely accepted the fact that I had been rejected. I even, to cope with my rejection, started a YouTube channel where I would play guitar and post videos just as a way to distract myself from my rejection. But maybe after 3 weeks of being ghosted, I get a call from the assistant casting director, and she goes like, "Zaid, can you come to the office tomorrow?" "Yes, of course," I reply enthusiastically, no questions asked. And then 30 minutes later, she calls me back and goes like, "By the way, we forgot to tell you that you got the role." I'm not sure how she forgot to tell me that, but I'm glad she remembered the second time. And so, meet the cast. This was the first time we met as the cast has been accepted. Of course, we've met multiple times during the audition process, but this was the first time we meet. This was also the first time Netflix officially released the news that they were producing the first Netflix Arabic original show. I'm not quite sure why they chose to post these selfies out of everything they could have posted, but those pictures have a very special place in my heart. This was also embarrassingly the first time I realized I was auditioning for a show, because the whole time I thought I was auditioning for a movie. And then on the script, also the first time we saw the script, because it was all improvised before, I saw episode 1. It was quite embarrassing, but it was also a very special day. And the rest was a dream. Being on set and filming was arguably one of the best experiences I've had in my life. I was the youngest cast member I was 16 years old at the time. And it was also the first time I was around people who truly enjoyed what they were doing. While I was treated often like a kid because of my age, I also matured and learned more in those months of filming than I ever have in my life. You see, often my interest in the arts, whether I was playing guitar or acting, was always a hobby in my head, something I had to push on the side so I could focus on my career and real life. Like a kid, I was running from the director to the camera operators, asking them about their lives, asking them about their careers, and learning as much as I can. For the first time, I learned what it meant to learn from people. This picture is in front of the camera operator as they were filming. Purely just put it to prove that I'm legit. And then this is the picture. This was actually after filming. Some of the cast members where we traveled to Dubai in the UAE to film some promotional content. So this was like 2 months before release. This is one of my favorite scenes that we shot in Petra. Our show was filmed between Amman, which is the capital of where I'm from, and Petra, one of the most beautiful places in the world, 7 landmarks of the world. And this was a selfie with one of the directors. We had 2 great directors. This is Omar, who plays my best friend in the show, and Mira, who is my secret, not so secret crush in the show. And I actually ended up asking her out in the show, but it was a funny scene, but I was pretty sad because I was rejected. Fast forward to June 12th of 2019, best night of my life. It was the premiere night, the night before the show was released. I have been waiting for this moment forever, because I couldn't talk much or share much about the show with my friends or peers, our family even. I was finally excited for the opportunity to show the world what I had been working on for over a year now. I was also at this time fully convinced that I wanted to be a full-time actor, so I was excited to share with the world my talent. But unfortunately, that was not my story. Within 24 hours of the show's release, everything went downhill. And soon, Jinn became one of the most heated and controversial topics in the country. You see, while our show talked about the lives of 7 teenagers as they saved the world from Jinn, the Arabic word for genie, it also included some controversial kissing, cursing, and cussing scenes. And taken out of context and spread everywhere, people were angered at this immoral show that they thought was there to ruin the next generation of Jordanian youth. While I was expecting some controversy, soon things went out of control. For the next 2 months, we were on the headlines of almost every single major news outlet and social media. And instead of being praised for what I thought was a pioneering project, we were either critiqued or at the heart of a very heated discussion. Even for the cast, things went out of control, where we were receiving daily hate messages to the point where half of the cast had to go off social media, some of whom actually never returned. And it got to the point where we received death threats, and Netflix had to hire 24/7 security outside of our home. There was national calls from the people to ban the show, none of which, of course, were accepted. And there was even like an informal national movement, mostly by people who've never watched the show, to rate the show 0 stars or star on IMDb, so no one watches our show and sees this immoral image of our country. I was shattered. If filming was the dream, then this had to be the nightmare. The controversy was inescapable. My parents were getting calls from family and friends asking them what the hell has just happened. And at the core of the controversy was not Netflix's name. It was not the production's name either. It was the name and faces of the actors, half of whom were minors. I could not comprehend in which world was our show immoral when the language of the hate messages we received was much worse than the ones we used in our show. I could not understand what was a moral representation of anything when 16 and 17-year-olds were being hated on by adults. I could not understand in which world was it okay to receive death threats and even be made fun of in public with videos receiving thousands of likes making fun of us. And the problem is, when it seems like a whole country is hating on you and your show, And suddenly your privacy is taken away from you, as people think they can have a public opinion on you and even share it to your face, regardless of your emotions. You start to internalize the hate. In part, I was angered because our show was not receiving the love I truly believed it deserved. In part, I was sad because I had lost a dream that I really wanted to pursue. In part, I was simply overwhelmed because nothing in life ever prepares you for an experience like this. In part, I was scared because I could not leave my house without security, but also because I did not know what I could do. In part, I was also apologetic for the harm I had caused my family, as they had to go through this with me. This is a video. This was the first post Netflix decided to post on their main account after the show was released. They originally wanted to post it on June 14th, which was the day right after, but things were already too overwhelming that I asked them to delay it to June, the second day after the show was released. And as you can see, it has over 2,000 comments. And while I think they're fangirling over this great actor, unfortunately, they were fighting. And at the heart of that fight was my video. And amidst all this chaos, how did I find peace? Netflix hired us celebrity coaches, which is their very fancy way of saying therapy. And while at first, it was actually my first time trying therapy, and while at first it didn't seem to work, it was very instrumental to help me ground myself and find my opinion when it seemed like everyone was throwing their opinion in my face. I had internalized a lot of the shame from the show. And in fact, while a lot of people would see this as an obvious accomplishment, it took me, for the longest time, I couldn't. In fact, for 2 years after the show was released. So the first step was to find my voice. What did I think of what was happening? Because I was constantly dragged right and left by what everyone was telling me. If I read a love message, I was happy. If I read a hate message, I was angry. If I read a harsh critique, I was sad. But how can I possibly regulate my emotions when I didn't know what I believed? And this was arguably the biggest learning experience from the show and this controversy. The world is constantly loud. And especially with social media, it seems like everyone has an amplified voice. So I needed some silence in my head to listen to what I was thinking and find my voice. It was very important for me to go for my sanity, for my mental health, to go through this, to find some sort of opinion that I could stick to. At first, I thought I would be angry at the people for being mad at the show, but in fact, I soon realized that I get it. In fact, it makes perfect sense. The media told our story in a very specific way, and they profited off of our story, and the actors just happened to be collateral. We always fall into media traps. It happens every day. And honestly, if everyone and their mothers was hating on the show, telling me it was a horrible show that was trying to ruin our generation, if I hadn't watched the show, I would be angry too. What I was angry at instead was this pattern I noticed. It seemed like all the love we were receiving was from people our generation, when all the hate or opposition that the show was facing was from older generations. And it seemed that the core of this controversy was a lack of youth representation. Rarely, if ever, are we at the heart of Jordanian media and our stories being told like that. And potentially, this has probably challenged people who not only disagreed with the content of the show, but even the idea of putting our stories forefront. And so, as a reaction to the show, as much as I think this is cheesy to say, as often influencers would say this, I felt like I had a platform and I wanted something to do with it. So with my best friend, we decided to start this magazine as a platform to provide Arab youth all over the world to share their opinions unapologetically. And that was how Talid was created. Talid was a by youth, for youth, bilingual digital magazine with the hopes to empower Arab youth. We soon grew to a team of over 30 artists, writers, filmmakers, social media managers, etc. I was shocked at the amount of support we were receiving. We grew way faster than we had expected in the year and a half that we operated in. And to my surprise, I was the one who was empowered, finding people with a similar passion to make a change, but also the similar anger of not being heard. This was the first issues cover that we released. It was really funny because when I posted this on my social media, someone went like, "Oh, just stick to acting." And I was like, wow, now people want me to be an actor. It seemed like whatever you do, people are just never pleased. But through this experience, I realized that I was not alone. While Jinn was a macro example, it cannot be looked at in isolation. It's part of a bigger problem, which is a lack of intergenerational communication, and specifically a constant desire to control young people. The team, whether they knew it or not, healed me. It was so beautiful to see the passion as they wrote about what really bothered them, but believing that they could make a difference. And it was also healing for me to realize that Jinn was not necessarily my peak. Because after you're on a Netflix show at the age of 17, you think you can never do anything that kind of amounts to something as valuable. But with a unified vision and a very dedicated team, I soon realized that with a brand name or without, I could make a difference. If my 7-year-old was seeking fame, then maybe what fame showed me is how short-lived the high from fame is. And what Zaid showed me is how long-lived purpose and working towards your purpose is. Jinn was a lot. I could probably spend another 20 minutes talking about so many different aspects of this experience that I haven't even touched on. And I would probably be processing and healing from different parts of this experience for the rest of my life. Jinn is a huge part of our identity, a big one. Often people would just yell Netflix at me and expect me to turn around, but I've also decided to completely gracefully accept this experience as part of my identity, the good and the bad, and realize that I will never peak through an experience, but I will always grow through these experiences, and our existence as people is bigger than any experience's impact on us. Nothing is ever one thing. So in response to my first question, is Jinn a dream or a nightmare? Over the years, I realized that it is both and everything in between. While I think I could probably have lived my life with slightly less intense controversy, I'm still grateful for the whole thing. And while I do not hope to romanticize the struggle that some of my fellow cast members and myself went through, I truly have chosen to accept this opportunity the way it is, because that's the only way I can move on. I'm grateful for Jinn, the dream, the nightmare, and everything in between, for igniting a purpose within me, but also for helping me find my voice. And I hope through my life to help others find their voice as well. Thank you.